Council come to order. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung.
Here.
Branderhorst. Here. Hamstra.
Here.
Skiba.
Here.
Hopkins.
Here.
Spore. Here.
For those of you attending via the telephone, you will be able to provide verbal comments during the dedicated public forum for public hearings. I would ask that you please keep your microphones or telephones on mute until the time at which you wish to speak. Can I get a motion for approval of the tentative agenda?
So moved.
Bannister, Skiba, any discussion? All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Hamstra.
Yes.
Skiba.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Branderhorst.
Yes.
Motion passed. This time, if there's anyone wishing to address council regarding an agenda item, please step to the microphone, state your name and address. Try to limit your comments to 3 minutes.
An agenda item?
Agenda item, yes. Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, council. My name is Gina Sales, and I am the owner of Green Barber Lounge, located on the main level of 717 Main Street. I'm commenting tonight on the item residential parking requirements in the Central Business District. In May, I visited with the planning and zoning staff to ask about the fire code so my family could live in the apartments located on the upper level of 717 Main Street. In summary, I was told there wasn't anything to discuss until I could show that there are 2 on-site parking spots for residential use of the space. I fast forward to today, as I have learned much about local politics and city code, and thank you for your time and energy and willingness to discuss whether or not the intent of this residential parking code was to prevent owners from living above their storefronts. As we have been diligently working to move our business, I received a very bothersome email from the planning and zoning staff explaining the fine structure for city code violation. And in response, the planning and zoning staff were informed that we had not taken up residence at 717 Main. A week later, my landlord called me quite upset that the planning and zoning staff called to tell her that paperwork was being drawn up to file for code violation at 717 Main Street with the Marion County Courts, as it had been reported that someone was living in 717 Main Street. So now tonight I am standing before you asking you to move in haste to solve this issue. We have been basically notified by city staff that we are being watched, which alone is quite bothersome and burdensome. But furthermore, we have no idea who someone is or what proof they have to support this accusation. It is simply untrue that anyone could reside in 717 Main Street under the current condition of the building. The main floor has only been able to house our business after thousands of dollars to create basic infrastructure for renovations. I'm asking you to please settle this issue of parking requirements in the Central Business District tonight so my husband and I can be left alone to continue restoring this beautiful building to the dignity that it deserves.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything to comment on the agenda? All right, can I get a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
So moved. Support.
DeYoung, Hopkins, any discussion?
I just had one comment. I think there's a mistake on the community services board minutes. If the minutes are dated on July 16, and they say the next meeting is June 18, and the minutes were typed May 24. Maybe Back to the Future.
We keep a DeLorean in the basement. So we'll get the dates correct.
Okay, if you do that, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
Branderhorst.
Yes.
Hamstra.
Yes.
Skiba.
Motion passed. So moving to a public hearing, item 1A, public hearing on the proposed Prairie Ridge Commercial Urban Renewal Plan. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to refer everyone's attention to the big board for a brief presentation on this item. As Mayor DeWard stated this evening, what tonight's public hearing is about is adoption of an urban renewal plan. This particular one, as Mayor DeWard stated, is for the Prairie Ridge Commercial Urban Renewal Plan. Now, ultimately, what we're trying to accomplish with this proposed urban renewal plan is we're trying to stimulate economic development through new commercial development for this area of this plan. And when we look at the urban renewal plan, basically, for those following at home, I'm on slide number 2 tonight, but it's basically this area that has the red highlighted lines through it, just to orientate folks out here. Washington Street and Highway G28 is located down here. The map extended further up to the northeast. You see Org 4 would be located right over here on it as well. And so the area, once again, that we have is the Prairie Ridge commercial development. The residential portion of Prairie Ridge is located further up to the northwest, and the Fifield Road extension is right over here. So again, it's the red highlighted area that we have here that's it's been identified. Mandy, let's go ahead, please. Now, as far as projects that are being proposed with the new urban renewal plan, one of the main items that we have, and we're going to be talking about it as it relates to the city's comprehensive plan, is additional restaurants and entertainment centers for the city. But what's being proposed with this particular urban renewal plan, this is the proposed location of the Smash Park Regional Entertainment Center. We do have a description of the Smash Park activities that are taking place, but in general, it's right around a 22,000 square foot facility that's scheduled to open in the calendar year 2022. The site that we're currently working on right now is under construction for the Smash Park with it. In addition, the developer is also being committed through a development agreement that we'll consider later on this evening to build a fast casual restaurant by 2024 as well. Now, one of the important points to note, as far as the on-site public infrastructure, and this road will be eventually named Golden Court Road, I believe, is the construction of a new on-site public street that we'll have here as well. The cost of that is just over $1.1 million. Let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, when we talk about urban renewal plans, it's always important to talk, and what's one of the requirements that we need to consider when we talk about new urban renewal districts is how does it relate to the city's comprehensive plan? And for those in attendance and following at home, the council is aware of this, but when we talk about the city's comprehensive plan, it's a plan for 20 years of growth in Pella. It's very important to note as we talk about how this relates to the city's comprehensive plan and whether it aligns or not. One of the items that was identified as a critical shortage in the city's comprehensive plan was the lack of restaurants and drinking establishments. In addition, when we look at this particular area, this is actually a map diagram taken straight from the city's comprehensive plan, and it identified this general area as prime area for additional commercial growth throughout the city. So the comprehensive plan identified the lack of restaurants, eating establishments, entertainment establishments as one of the key impediments for Pella's future. It also identified this general area as one of the preferred areas for growth for commercial development within the city. So when we evaluate it from staff's perspective and talk about this urban renewal plan, we feel it very strongly aligns with the city's comprehensive plan as well. Let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, as far as the public improvements that may occur off-site, if you recall, when we looked at the urban renewal plan and took a look at the map, you may be wondering why a portion of G28 and Washington Street is included in the plan. And that's because when we look at Washington Street and Fifield Road, we believe that there's going to be some additional improvements that are necessary. I would say to maintain traffic flow and traffic conditions is what you currently know them as well. Now, based on the anticipated development within here, we anticipate sometime constructing traffic signals at this location of Washington Street and Fifield Road. In addition, the City Council also approved the additional right-hand turn lane into the development. We're planning on constructing that right-hand turn lane in 2022 before the establishments are built and open as well. Overall, when we look at off-site improvements on here, we're just shy of $356,000 from this. It is important to note that we'll be using our share of the federal gas tax to help pay for the traffic signals as well. And so when we look at the engineering and the city's cost of the off-site public improvements, is just shy of $130,000 for the off-site. Once again, those are to maintain the current traffic conditions. So once the traffic signals are constructed, the off-site improvements, the right-hand turn lane is constructed. Overall, just shy of $356,000. City share is just under $130,000. So let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, in summary, it's important to note in considering this item that the Planning and Zoning Commission did consider this same matter at their last meeting on this as well. No written comments were received by the commission. In fact, the commission found that they felt that the urban renewal plan was in conformity with the city's comprehensive plan. Now, as a result, we have a couple items on the agenda. Number one here is Resolution E1B, that's Resolution 6338, and that determines the Prairie Ridge commercial area to be an economic development area and also designates the areas appropriate for urban renewal projects, and more importantly, also adopts the urban renewal plan that we know it tonight. Now, it would be E1C, which is Ordinance 998, and what that does is it forms an ordinance to collect taxes within the urban renewal plan, and that's very, very important when we talk about economic development in general. It's very important as we consider constructing public improvements and also award economic development incentives. Suggested urban renewal plan is to be able to collect taxes within that area. And you're talking about new development. What we're hoping to do is be able to collect taxes within that area and use the property taxes generated within that area to promote economic development for the city as well. So that's what the Ordinance 998 does as well. So Mandy, is that all right? No, that was a lot, Mr. Mayor, and I would just state to the mayor and council, and this is probably the second or third time that we've been through the urban renewal plan, but just as well, I realize there may be questions. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions the mayor and council may have on this item.
All right, thanks, Mike. Mandy, any written comments received?
No written comments.
Any comments, council? Any comments from the general public? All right, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
DeYoung, Hopkins, any discussion? All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung,
Yes.
Hopkins,
Yes.
Spore,
Yes.
Reindeerhorst,
Yes.
Danstruck,
Yes.
Seabout.
Motion passed. Item 1B, resolution number 6338, entitled Resolution Determining an Area of the City to be an Economic Development Area and that the rehabilitation, conservation, redevelopment, development, or a combination thereof in such area is necessary in the interest of the public health, safety, or welfare of the residents of the city, designating such area as appropriate for urban renewal projects and adopting the Prairie Ridge Commercial Urban Renewal Plan. I assume there's nothing you need to add, Mike?
That is correct, sir.
Can I get a motion for approval of the resolution?
So moved. Support.
Answer Hopkins, any discussion? All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Danstruck,
Yes.
Hopkins,
Yes.
Spore,
Yes.
DeYoung,
Yes.
Reindeerhorst,
Yes.
Seabout.
Motion passed. Moving on to item 1C, ordinance number 998, entitled, an ordinance providing that general property tax is levied and collected each year on all property located within the Prairie Ridge Commercial Urban Renewal Area in City of Pella, County of Marion, State of Iowa, by and for the benefit of the State of Iowa, City of Pella, County of Marion, Pella Community School District, and other taxing districts be paid to a special fund for the payment of principal and interest on loans, monies advanced to an indebtedness, including bonds issued or to be issued incurred by the city in connection with the Prairie Ridge Commercial Urban Renewal Area, the Prairie Ridge Commercial Urban Renewal Plan, and this is the first reading. Mike, anything to add?
No, sir.
Can I get a motion for approval of the ordinance? DeYoung? Hopkins? Discussion? All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung,
Yes.
Hopkins,
Yes.
Spore,
Yes.
Reindeerhorst,
Yes.
Danstruck,
Yes.
Seabout.
Motion passed. Okay, item 2A, public hearing on the proposal to enter into a development agreement with RDP Holdings LLC. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd be more than happy to explain this item. And once again, I'd like to refer the council's attention to the big board for a presentation on this item. What we have here on slide number 7 for those following at home. This is very closely associated with the previous item. The previous item we considered the urban renewal plan, so that's the formation of an urban renewal district that was intended to promote economic development within the district. This item that we're considering tonight is a proposed development agreement with RDT Holdings on this as well. It's very important, and I want to lead off by stating that council's been through the parameters of the development agreement before. The terms that we're discussing tonight are the same terms that the City Council approved on May 18th of this year. If you recall, we issued a conditional resolution of support to the developers to allow them to begin on site and the construction progress on site. So the terms that we discussed on May 18th are the exact same terms that are being proposed this evening, included in the development agreement. Now, just to recap, when we look at the two items that we have as far as the private entities, and really there's three items that we have up here on the big board. The developer's responsibilities that we have that's included within the development agreement would be the responsibility to construct a Smash Park recreational center on here, and it's anticipated it'll be open in the year 2022. We'll need to have a fast casual restaurant that will also need to be completed by December of 2024. And once again, they'll also need to build the public infrastructure. So this is the road that leads into the development. It will be a new road at the City of Pella. They'll need to build it to city standards and dedicate it to the City of Pella. The cost of that road is just over $1 million, right around $1,157,000. So let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, when we talk about development agreements, once again, this is an agreement with a private developer, and let's go over the developer's responsibilities, what we have this evening. Very important, as we stated, the developer will be responsible to construct the public infrastructure to city standards. So once again, this would be the new Goldenrod Court Road that is shown up on the big board. That will be a city street. We'll need to also dedicate the public infrastructure once it's complete to the City of Pella. Now, as far as the developer is concerned, they're going to need to construct the Smash Park restaurant by December 2022. It's anticipated that Smash Park will be open before then. The development agreement does give them until December if necessary. And then also for the Smash Park is a 22,000 square foot recreational facility. They'll need to sign a minimum tax assessment of $5 million. Now, the assessor is free to assess above and beyond $5 million, but the floor is $5 million for purposes of this development. And that's the taxable valuation as well. The developer is also going to be responsible to construct a fast casual restaurant by December of 2024. Once again, for the fast casual restaurant, that minimum tax assessment is going to be $2 million. So between them, there's a minimum of $7 million in the development that they're going to be constructed in new values of it being proposed by the developers. For both of the entities, the minimum or the floor will increase 2% per year at a minimum. Once again, the Marion County assessor is free to tax, and those values could be above and beyond what we have listed up here, are the minimum standards in the development agreement. Mandy, let's go ahead, please. Now, as far as the City of Pella's responsibilities are concerned, and once again, this is when it ties into economic development incentives and needs of the city. If you recall, we spent some time in the previous presentation and talked about needs within the city's comprehensive plan, the lack of eating and drinking and entertainment establishments as well. So if the developer builds Smash Park, agrees and has the buildings assessed at a $5 million value, builds a fast casual restaurant by 2024, and once again, $2 million in value minimum assessment, and also builds $1.1 million worth of public streets and dedicates them, according to city standards, and dedicates them to the City of Pella, then what our responsibilities would be is we'd issue a $1.5 million payment that would be due 150 days after the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the Smash Park. The second portion of the payment, if it totals $2 million, would be $500,000 that would be paid within 30 days of the certificate of occupancy for the restaurant. And just to explain what certificate of occupancies are, this is once the buildings are built, our building inspector goes out, or our inspection crews goes out, and the building meets all city codes and standards. We issue a certificate of occupancy at that point. So everything's done, everything's built to city standards, so the developer has to make these upfront investments. If they do, the first portion of the payment is right around $2 million. The second item that we have in the development agreement is there's a $300,000 pass-through payment that's due within 30 days after approval of the development agreement. It's important to note the city has already received this donation of $300,000 tonight. So once again, this is simply a pass-through amount. So overall, it's $2.3 million. The city has already received the $300,000 donation. So once again, our responsibility would be the $2 million for the on-site public infrastructure and also incentives for the 2 buildings that are being proposed with this as well. Now, it is important to note when we look at development agreements, they can be long-term in nature. Urban renewal plans are fairly long-term. What the developer is looking at right here is if they build the Smash Park, if they're in compliance and it's operated as a Smash Park recreational regional entertainment center over the life of the development, once the city pays back our initial investment on the debt issue for the infrastructure, for the incentives, once we've paid it back, the developer would be eligible for $2 million in tax incremental rebates. So once again, what we're looking at is the rebates of the property that's located within the development. These buildings don't exist right now. It's bare farm ground out there right now. So these would be new buildings. They'd be eligible for the rebate, but only after the city has repaid our initial investment on this as well. So this is one of the items when we look at compliance on long term and make sure the buildings are operated on what the city is intended for. This is a key item in the development agreement as well. So let's go ahead, Mandy. It is important to note that we did hire the city's financial consultant, that would be D.A. Davidson, specifically Mike Maloney, to look at this from the City of Pella standpoint. When we talk about a $2 million payment from the City of Pella to the developer, we will have to issue likely a bond issue. What we're relying on is the property tax valuations that will be generated from the new buildings within the development. We hired D.A. Davidson to look at this, and on both cases, they ran 2 scenarios for us. One scenario was there is no additional development over the next 20 years besides these 2 buildings. That's the only thing that occurs out there. The second item is you had a moderate growth of an additional building of roughly $2 million in valuation that occurs over 20 years. Now, under the scenarios, it's very important to note under both scenarios, TIF districts and the formation of TIF districts often take what's called seed money. And so when we look at the seed money in here, it'd be about a $41,000 deficit in 23-24. We would recoup that deficit over time as tax valuations come in off the new development and we pay our bond issue back. So the city, under both models, if nothing else occurs out there, the city would be paid back on its investment under this. Now, as far as RDP is concerned, if you recall, their incentive payment to make sure the buildings are operated for the long term in accordance with the development agreement, we have under their base case, so if nothing else occurs besides the Smash Park fast casual restaurant, we have $7 million in valuation, 2% annual growth. The projected rebate under that scenario to RDP would be over just about $1.6 million. If we have modest growth, it looks like they will recruit $2 million on that as well. And in addition, we'd have about $500,000 of unobligated TIF revenues that would be at the actually discretion of the Pella City Council under that scenario. So again, what we've tried to be is conservative in the financial projections. The city's financial consultant prepared both of these projections. So let's go ahead, Mandy. Now, as far as the development agreement, once again, this very closely relates to the city's urban renewal plan. One of the items in the city's comprehensive plan was a critical shortage of eating and drinking establishments within our community. We believe the Smash Park Recreation Center directly addresses that and is needed. We also believe it could serve as a catalyst for additional development within the city of Pella as well. It also appears that the tax incremental revenues, so this would be the new property taxes that would be generated from the development, would cover the city's bond issue and the bond investment on it as well, under both what I would label as 2 what we hope is fairly conservative financial scenarios as well. And then finally on this, once the city, once again, reimburses ourselves for our investment in the project, the developer would be eligible for rebates on the development as well. And we walk through those financial scenarios, but once again, that's tied to a long-term development agreement. And it's also our way of ensuring that we have compliance with the developer as well. So as a result, Mr. Mayor, in summary, we are recommending approval of the development agreement this evening, and I know that was a lot to digest and a lot to go over. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions the mayor and council may have on this item.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Any written comments received, Andy?
No written comments.
Council comments?
Is there any sunset clause in that 2% annual?
The 2% annual is in effect as long as the
Goes
development
on
agreement
in-
sees.
As long as it's a sports park, that's 2%.
Yeah, it's 2% every year.
That's minimum,
That's minimum.
besides
So-
whatever the assessor does.
Yeah, an example is the Smash Park, the assessor comes in and assesses it at 7 million, the valuation is 7 million, not 5.
So is it 2% above the 7 million
No,
now,
it's
or above
2%
the
of
5?
the floor. If you look at it, what we're doing is we're establishing the floor for the Smash Park, 5 million, that goes up 2% each year as the floor. It can never be lower than the floor.
I hope, it could be 20 years down the road, I hope that doesn't become an issue with the developer. But I guess, as long as it's a smash park, it's in place, so. Very good, thank you.
I'll tell you what 2% compounded is.
He's got that calculation going right now. Anything else, council? Anybody in the public want to comment? Okay, and that, if not, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So,
DeYoung, Vanstra, any discussion? All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung.
yes.
Vanstra.
Yes.
Skibout.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Score.
Yes.
Reindeerhorst.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to resolution number 6339, entitled Resolution Approving and Authorizing Execution of a Development Agreement by and between the City of Pella and RDP Holdings LLC. I assume nothing to add, Mike?
You're correct, sir.
Can I get a motion for approval?
Support.
Hopkins, Spore, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Score.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Reindeerhorst.
Yes.
Vanstra.
Yes.
Skibout.
Yes.
Motion passed. Okay, moving on to administration reports. We need to reschedule a regular council meeting on November 2, 2021 due to the election. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and I think that summary was well stated. City elections are scheduled to occur on Tuesday, November 2nd. So what this administrative request is simply to move the date of the council meeting to Monday, November 1st, so not to conflict with the elections for city elections on the 2nd. So that is our request.
Any motion for approval?
So moved.
Sword. Randers, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Reindeerhorst.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Score.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Vanstra.
Yes.
Skibout.
Yes.
Motion passed. Abstract of bills number 2086. Can I get a motion for approval?
Move to approve and issue warrants.
Randers, Banster, any discussion or questions? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Reindeerhorst.
Yes.
Vanstra.
Yes.
Skibout.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Score.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Motion passed. Any council members have any other business you wanted to address the rest of the council with this evening?
I do.
Okay.
I have a couple things. One is back in March, we had a discussion whether to accept a proposal given before us by Snyder and Associates to do a study of Big Rock Park. And at that time, we determined not to do it. I think the cost of the city was going to be like $19,000 or something like that. Since then, the city has entered into an agreement with a group of scientists from several universities. The scientists submitted a grant. The grant was accepted by the Marion County Community Foundation. So this study is of no cost to the city. It's a 2-year study, and one of the lead scientists on the study that costs the city nothing will be on television on the Discovery Channel tomorrow night, and that is Dr. Benedict. So I think it's really a wonderful turn of events that we have one of the leading scientists in the nation that is an authority on bats will be one of our lead scientists in the study of Big Rock Park. So I thought that was a pretty cool turn of events. Not only
What was the program?
the Discovery Channel.
Okay.
Yep, yeah. So, and he will be the one studying and looking for the Indiana brown bat in Big Rock Park. So, and fingers crossed that he finds some. So, pretty, yeah. Well, based on the fact that there are shagbark hickory in the park, there's a really high likelihood. So, if you don't know what else to do tomorrow night, put your PJs on and watch Dr. Benedict and think about him in our own park. And then secondly, I just wanted to bring up, where are we had voted and approved in this year's budget for a study for the ground where the light plant used to be, and I believe it was $71,000. And I have heard nothing on it, and it was one of the top projects that the council voted on. So I wondered if you could give me an update on that.
Be happy to.
Thank
What
you.
we've done is we've done some preliminary environmental work, and that's part of the updates that I'll be providing council a little more in depth on it. With the study, before we initiated a design on it, we went back through on the environmental just to make sure it did some preliminary reviews, but there'll be more information coming out on it. So what we've
Okay.
done. But it hasn't been no action, it's just been on the environmental side, and that's normal what happens with projects, particularly on that particular site. It's important to do preliminary environmental work just to make sure before we start with the engineering design contract on it. So but there'll be more information to come.
Good.
That's one question, Mike. The city and the county census numbers have come out. When do the wards come out? Do we have to do changing of that at all for the population changes, or how does that work?
Okay. I'm going to ask either Mandy or Corey to take that question on it. So, Mandy, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I talked to Jake Grandia, the county auditor, so he will be sending information to us at the beginning of the year, and then if we do need to make adjustments, it'll be ordinance changes to change the words formally, but it won't be until at least January, if not later.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? All right, any member of the public have any other business that you'd like to address the council with? If so, please come to the microphone, state your name and address, and try to limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Can we turn the lights on over here? Thank you. Hate to work in the dark. Name is John Butler, live at 406 Franklin Street. Just a little advertisement, our house is on the Christmas house walk this year. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad, but we're already working on it. So, pray for us. So I just wanted to come back with a few comments. I mentioned last time the difference between civil law and moral law. And so when does a civil law become immoral? And I think it's when a group is highlighted in a law that gives them special protection above and beyond what's provided for us in the Constitution. We are all provided protection under the law, under Amendment 14, equally. The minute you start to carve out places, you begin to divide us into groups. And I don't want to deny anybody their civil right. I don't want to deny anybody their moral right. But I think that when we start getting laws on the books, and we have those laws, hate crimes, isn't all crime hate? It seems to me all crime is hate. That why are we defining this if and then the transgenders are protected, the homosexuals are protected. They should all be protected under what's already in the book. And when you divide them out, it gives the legal community a twig to hang on to bring lawsuits to us and infringe on our money, which is the bottom line about everything, is money. And so I think that we need to define our policies based on moral law. Anytime it runs against the civil law, we have to be ready to defend that. And it's going to take money. And
I'm here to say that I don't have a lot of money, but I'd be willing to put money into that kind of program. So just wanted to kind of clarify that. What is immoral civil law? I think it's when a group gets picked out and allowed to pick on our pockets through legal procedures. And I'll just leave that with you. Thanks for listening. And, oh, by the way, thanks for moving us forward in the agenda.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Anyone else? All right, seeing none, we will adjourn to a policy and planning to discuss 3 items. Are we doing them in this order, Mike?
I believe I see Mr. Myers back on Big Rock Park, and I know we have the sales here for this, and so, yes, sir, we have members for both items. We'll go ahead with it.
So we'll start with the disc golf basket donation.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, what we're here to talk tonight about is Big Rock Park and specifically the disc golf baskets that are currently at Big Rock Park. Recently, we've received a proposal by Central College, and what they've requested is to revive, they're in the process of revitalizing their current disc golf course, and they'd like to utilize the baskets that the city currently owns for the Big Rock Park disc golf course on this as well. And one of the items they asked for is for a donation from the City of Pella on the baskets themselves. And so you can see them pictured up on the big board. As council's aware, we've put everything in, as Councilmember Brandenhorst said, there's currently an environmental study that's taking place at the park. We put everything on hold right now. And previously we have received this from the disc golf organization that was promoting the park as well. Central College has requested the baskets. We went to the Community Services Board to get their position on the matter, and what they are recommending is that the city donate the baskets based on with the condition that the college provides written permission for the general public to use, of course, when it's not used for college events as well. And so with that, we just wanted to present this item to the City Council, and also before any type of formal action is taken on it, make sure we address any questions that council has or things that we need to follow up on. The Community Services Board is recommending donation of the baskets as well. So with that, Mr. Mayor, that concludes this brief presentation. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions the council may have on this item.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
So the city will be removing the baskets, right? It's that, I have no problem with the donation. In fact, I would absolutely encourage it. I guess I'm wondering, just a housekeeping question. When you remove the baskets, there will be no need for the cement launching pads. Would those then be removed or demolished at the same time?
I think that's probably an item for discussion on the pads. Jeanette, I don't know if the Community Services Board talked about that.
Yeah, they actually recommended leaving them in place until the environmental study is complete.
Well, that's what it says there, yeah. Community Service Board recommends to donate the baskets and to leave the basket sleeves pads in place till the environmental study is done. So that's their recommendation. Doesn't mean it has to be ours, but that's their recommendation.
I do have a question. Was the point of the study for an environmental study, or was for a planned usage of the park? There was a lot of discussion previously on what the study was intended to do. So the question I have is, are we going to use this environmental study to tell us what the park can be used for, or is it just going to have another study tacked onto the back of it that might take another 2 years?
I can probably answer that for you. It's a federal law of our country that if you have an environment that is conducive to housing any federally protected animal, plant, reptile, that you do a study before you even consider disrupting their environment. And that, if you do not do that, the federal government can come down on a community quite substantially. There was an incident outside of Eddyville where a road was constructed. They were taking a curve out of a road, but what the city neglected to identify was the very reason that the curve was in the road was to protect the environment of an endangered lizard. When the federal government found out about it, they had to remove the road and put it back to the original structure. So this study will, when these species are identified, if they're identified, then will allow us to go on, category and catalog what is in there and how those species and man can live conducively.
Memory serves me correctly, Chris, I think that as council, we just wanted to know what we were dealing with before we went ahead and made long-term plans for Big Rock Park. If
So
there's
there will
nothing
be a
there,
follow-up study.
what's that?
So there will be a follow-up study.
I would think so.
Okay, sounds good. So
I would
that's
think
where
so.
that's where our intent for leaving the baskets in as well is just since there's no been official decision, we just want to leave it in the ground because who knows, they might come back and say you can allow disc golf. So we don't want to take too many steps
Right.
from that standpoint.
Right.
And this group of scientists is actually going to also give suggestions as to where and what type of recreation can take place. And also they're going to give suggestions on eradication of invasive species that are.
And their
currently-
degrees are more qualified, correct? Is that my
Yes,
understanding?
much more
Oh, okay,
qualified
sounds
than
good.
Snyder and Associates
Yeah.
were. Plus it was a lot less expensive,
Okay.
yeah.
I don't have any problem with those pads, launching pads, staying there. Until we can figure
No, I
out
don't.
where it's at.
Okay.
I don't do that.
All right, so it sounds like the recommendation from the community service board come back with
away.
for us to approve.
Mike, just a technical question, when we give something away, does there have to be a public hearing and like a sale? There's something I think that we have to do maybe different than just hand it over. I'm not sure.
As far as a donation, it may be considered surplus property.
Yes.
That's a city attorney question. First issue is to make sure we want to go through with it, but there may have to be a public hearing on it, but we'll have that nailed down
Okay.
from the city attorney on it, so.
What's the value here? Do we know?
We
About
paid
$6,000.
$6,000.
$6,000? Okay.
And Bruce and I are just kind of, with a smile, what ifing here. What if you took those standards and elevated them with a higher pole and put Martin houses on them or something like that to keep the insects down?
Wrap a metal thing around the pole so coon don't get it.
Okay,
Good talking.
anything else on this subject? All right, we'll move on to the residential parking requirements.
Okay, what we have here this evening, I'm going to preface my comments that this is an item that we've discussed informally at planning and zoning. And what we have been trying to do was schedule a joint, and we still are, joint city council planning and zoning meeting. We met at the commission level, and this was one of the items that they were planning on discussing with the city council on it as well. Fortunately, the good news for the city, we have a lot of projects going on. As the council's aware, our meeting's been quite full lately. And we're still in the process of scheduling a joint P&Z meeting, but maybe later this fall. We thought, since there's been a good bit of discussion on 717 Main Street, one of the items we'd like to discuss and recommend is to get the Planning and Zoning Commission, have a recommendation from the City Council to look at this particular issue on it, so they could at least get started with their process and how we evaluate, how the planning and, can't say we anymore, the Planning and Zoning, Jerry Bidos and the commission will go about reviewing this issue. But as background on this, when we look at 717 Main, that's in the central business district as far as zoning. We've had an ordinance that's been on the city's code of ordinances, I believe, since 1976, and basically what it says is retail establishments have to be on the first floor. If you're going to have residential uses, they could be on the upper floor, But if you do have residential uses, you need to have at least 2 on-site parking spaces on there. So the intent of the ordinance was to make sure that we had a retail environment in the central business district, and then as council's aware, you have public parking that serves the retail development in the central business district, and that's been the intent on it as well. Since that time, there's been a number of inquiries that we've had, not only from Mr. and Mrs. Sales, but others on this matter as well. And so some of the items, if council decides would like to recommend this down to the Planning and Zoning Commission, with this that we could use is to simply state that any use with the CBD other than residential is exempt from the off-street parking requirement, as well as single family. Actually, I think I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So yeah, there we go, Mandy. So some of the options that the Planning and Zoning Commission may state is they may look at it, they may review it, and by the time, quite often, anytime you have a proposed ordinance, it's important to understand that since this would be a zoning change, if you're going to take official action and change the ordinance, there'd be a public hearing at the Planning and Zoning Commission. There'd also be a public hearing at the City Council level, and then most likely there'd be 2 additional public readings of the proposed ordinance. But even before you get that far, the Planning and Zoning Commission would have work sessions. There'd probably be 1, if not 2 work sessions on it. There'd be communication back to the City Council to make sure the Planning and Zoning Commission was on the right track with their thoughts before formal ordinances were considered. So you're looking at it, it's somewhat of a lengthy process, but it's like anything, when you have issues like this, and particularly parking issues in the central business districts, there's all sorts of stakeholders involved, and that's why the process is designed for public input on it. So once again, just by simply deferring this action and letting the Planning and Zoning Commission starting, what we're really saying is we want to have them start on the preliminary research on the draft ordinance or address the issue, or at least share their thoughts and begin the process, rather than wait for a joint planning session where we say, these are the 4 to 5 items we want to focus on or look at. What we're recommending is let's start on this one, let's still have our joint session, but at least they can begin work on this item. And so with that, I believe that is our presentation, Mr. Mayor, but we're simply looking for direction. We'd like to refer this issue to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And if you say yes, we'll start on this. It'll be at our September meeting at the Planning and Zoning Commission. We'll have a work session on this item.
Okay.
Absolutely. Are you asking any feedback from council on any of the 1 through 4?
Well, we always encourage feedback, but once again, the comments are, there'll be a process, including 2 public hearings, and normally, anytime you talk about parking changes in the downtown, I'm sure we'll stir up the discussion. You're more than welcome to give us feedback, but again, the Planning and Zoning Commission would start on this. It'd be at Jerry, their meeting this month is
September 24th.
September 24th.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
You mentioned that the law was on the book, ordinance was on the book since the 70s.
Mhm.
Mark was probably on when it was passed.
Mhm.
So the reason for that, Gina mentioned to prevent owners living above the storefronts. As I read this, I figured it was done to prevent parking spaces for customers of storefronts and service providers from commandeering the spaces.
That was what I believe the intent was, that if you had residential property owners that didn't have parking spaces, they would take prime parking spaces for retail development. That's likely the concern. That's what I've assumed.
That would be my assumption, but
And another thing that entered into it was snow removal. You have cars out there every night, all year long.
Would this be
Not
more
to be a
of a-
wet blanket, I've seen pictures of your remodel, my compliments, it's beautiful. And I know other people who have lived in those upper stories, which I think is a desirable thing, to have people living there. They walk a block through a parking lot under any kind of weather. But if there's some way we can make this more user-friendly, I'd be for it. And I totally understand deferring to Denny about the snow removal part of that. That's pain.
Do we know, presumably there's other upper story residential being used currently that may or may not have parking. Do we have a list of that? I'm just guessing there's probably currently buildings that maybe are in violation already of this ordinance. Do we, I assume that's gonna come into play as well. If we're discussing this, we're gonna have to consider buildings that are already
That'll
in
be
that
a point of,
situation.
that'll be a point of discussion. And generally how things come about is when people do something new, like remodels, and talk to us about the requirements, what they want to do, and that's when they're informed of city requirements. But also, the other way it is when we get concerned reports on illegal uses or potentially illegal uses or inquiries, that's how it is. But that's a key point is for those folks that may be currently illegal too on it, and they'll be part of the process.
And is there definition, I assume we'll probably work this out, but so is the definition just strictly generic residential? Like is there language that determines like residential versus, say, Airbnb or something like that, or primary residence versus apartment, or, whatever.
Yeah, that'll be part of the process. I think it's a good question, and, keep in mind that the ordinance is somewhat dated on it, as well, so distinguishing at the time Airbnbs and things of the modern approach on it, those will be the items that will be discussed. So usually it's been my experience on these code changes, it's quite a process on it as well. So it could move fast, just depending on if everyone's in agreement on the approach.
What if they don't have a car?
What's that?
What if you don't have a car?
It's still a requirement on the.
You have to have a parking space if you don't have a car.
And keep in mind too, the other part of anytime you get in code enforcement, if the concern is retail spots being dedicated towards residential use, you have to have a way to enforce the ordinance on it from city staff standpoint. And I've heard a lot of like potential solutions, and I think they're good, creative solutions, and as Councilmember Young said, being more user-friendly, and we're definitely willing to look at things. But at the end of the day, too, we have to have something that you can enforce and fairly easy and straightforward. And I believe that's probably the intent of the code is it's based on the fact that someone will have a car, or most likely will have a car.
I concur with what Mark said. I think the trend nowadays really is more and more urban. The only thing I would maybe look to add, Jerry, would, rather than demanding 2 parking spots, I think 1 would be appropriate. More and more, especially in urban settings, they have 1 vehicle. If they have 2, then it's their problem. But at least we're providing them an option. Just my thoughts.
I lived in an apartment, and I'm assuming that they had 2 parking spaces, but it was not available to me as the renter. It was used for their business purpose, right? So even if there is a parking space, that doesn't necessarily translate to who's getting it. It was not conducive. I had many snowy nights where I moved it, and sometimes didn't. Sorry, I found out the hard way. But I think, I don't know what the answer is, but definitely trying to find a way to make it easier to live in that area.
Mark, were you on the council in 1976? I can't say what I was going to say. I was going to say none of us had anything to do with this ordinance. Mark. But so the ordinance was written by somebody that felt like it made sense. And as I started in business in this town in 1982, and I've been downtown most of my life since then. So I have quite a history of being downtown. And this issue about the parking spots availability in the central business district has been ongoing for all of those years I've been downtown, and nothing irritated people more than office business owners that would park in front of their own office and work 8 hours and take up a space that some retail customer was coming. So I just want to make sure we're careful. I agree. I like the allow leasing of spaces to where they can walk, but we cannot have people living and parking on the main streets that has retail with cars sitting there all day. We would get screamed at by the downtown retail people, big time. And so it's gotta make some sense for everybody. And I agree, downtown living in 1976 was not a thing. Now it's a big thing. And so we have to update so that it makes sense. Because a building like they're talking about, to renovate and put a residence in there makes so much perfect sense. And so we should be able to figure out a solution so that it can happen. But we have to be wise about it and not create more problems than fix. So that's my only concern, is that we need to figure it out, but let's make sure we study it enough to know what we're doing.
How do we figure it out in a timely fashion? That's my concern.
That's a good question.
I'm a little bit alarmed by that, because as a small business owner myself, I know that when you're working on a business and Nick and I live right next door to our business, we couldn't do what we do if we didn't live there. You know, we work 7 days a week, and I'm ecstatic that they're doing what they're doing. I just know how difficult it is to do it 8 hours a day. It's 12, 14, 16, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I don't want to belabor this so that their project becomes halted. And that is concerning to me. How do we dedicate P&Z's time and our time to getting this expedited?
Put the caveat on there, P&Z will make it a priority, and it's not the commission, it isn't anything that they have. What usually dictates, and has been my experience on zoning changes, is about the amount of public interest and public debate on it. What we've heard now is we've heard a request from people wanting to use additional parking spaces, but we haven't heard from the group that the mayor referenced either. And so I would put the caveat is as long as everyone's in agreement what the fix is and it's not controversial, it can move rather quickly. It depends on how it's viewed, and that's part of the process. I mean, changing laws at the city allows for public input, and that's the key caveat. It's not intended to move fast, it's intended to facilitate public input, so it just depends on how much the public's interested in how big of a change we're proposing. I hate to be wishy-washy, but some of it's unknown when you deal with the public, but the system's set up to facilitate public input.
And I don't mean to be a stinker about it, I really don't. I just think that as everyone has said, I mean, this isn't something that is just a flash in the pan. This is going to be a new way of living, and we have a family here, and you know, I think it's really important that we look at this and get it done quickly. Or I don't know, if you can give them a kitchen pass so they can start doing what they need to do, and also show them a little grace in this. I mean, I don't know, I'm rather astounded by it. I really am.
The ordinance, or?
Just the fact that all they want to do is make this a better place to live. It's not like they're firing rifles out of the upper windows of the building. They just want to give a really great haircut to a lot of really wonderful citizens and raise 5 amazing children, one of which I had the honor of meeting with on Saturday. I mean, that's my dilemma, is a patient approach. I understand that. I just want to know that we are going to dedicate time to this, and that this is not going to get kicked down the road.
I would say once it's in P&Z's court, it's directed, the chairman's very good at staying on items on it.
Well, and
We've
I
been
have
waiting.
Robin's phone number, I can call her and
Yeah.
bother her.
P&Z is not, they'll keep on track. The key thing that's going to determine the time is how it's viewed by the public, and there's always another side, and, you know, and how vocal it is. If it's not controversial, it makes sense. Those are the proposals that move through the system quickly.
Okay.
Anything where there's stakeholders or view that there could be less than optimal results on it or vested interest on the other side, those are the things that usually take a little bit of time, and that you're dealing with the wild card. But that's how the system is set up.
And to use your phrase, a new way of living, we sure want to do it right.
Yep.
You know, because
I
this
can
could be,
appreciate it.
this could be a new, like you said, I think this is a new wave we're seeing in all communities.
Yep.
I'm trying to remember where city staff parked when that was City Hall. Is there no parking behind that building?
It's a zero lot.
Pardon?
It's a zero lot. There is no option for parking.
Because we didn't have a big staff then, but there were 4 or 5 people in that building.
We use for employees in the central business district for parking, so, or recommended.
Okay, anything else?
So we're on it, Mayor.
Get P and Z up on,
Yes, sir.
down move as quickly as possible.
All right.
We got a head shake back there, so.
Can I add a couple things? Can I interrupt?
Yeah, sure.
This is not a new use of the building. I've talked to a lot of people in my chair, and the city itself rented out an apartment in that place, and I found evidence of that in some of the work that I've done out there. And there is no option for off-street parking for that building because it is a zero lot. So this is not a new use. There's lots of people that are living in places above businesses downtown. There's 5 apartments on that same block. So this is not a new use. It was in the process of being renovated. So I kind of feel like this is not a new thing that we're trying to do here. This is just, I don't know why this is taking so long, or why we're even in this position right now saying that this can't be a residence. So that's my 2 cents.
I would assume that discussion has been had at staff level.
We've spent a considerable amount of time not only with the sales, but others that are interested in it as well. So it's just not the sales that are on it as well. So those points have been gone over numerous times, so.
May I speak something? Karen Eisen asked me to speak a little bit on behalf of the chamber on this subject. I sit on the Downtown Development Committee, the Commercial Development Committee, and I think the comment there was the value of having more residents downtown. And I think the general belief in that, it adds to the vitality of the downtown, it increases property value. So there's a lot of value in having more residential property downtown and have it be better property rather than just be, well, we'll convert the attic, my store into a low rent property, trying to bring that up. And I think that's a little bit what they're trying to do, is make this nice property. And I think it's on behalf of the really the vitality and sort of the activity level that goes downtown. These things really contribute nicely to it. And it also, I know in some communities, it also reduce street crime just simply by virtue of having a lot of street traffic later in the evening, having people around. It's a good thing. It cuts down on vandalism and that kind of thing. So take that as at least a late arrival comment on this. That's sort of the perspective, I think, really in the downtown committee. There's a lot of value in it, and probably worth making some accommodation on parking and other details.
Yeah, I don't think anybody up here will disagree with anything you just said.
Okay.
I think everybody agrees. It's a newer concept, all this downtown thing, but it's a good concept. But we got to be careful about the parking part of it to protect our retailers and everybody else. So I think there will be a solution, a very workable solution. I would assume we can figure it
Thank
out.
you. I do know in some cities, by the way, that downtown residents give parking permits, limited hour parking permits, and so they're allowed to park, between, have overnight parking privileges, but they're required to move their cars after 7 a.m. or something like that.
Okay.
All right. Okay, let's move on to the last item, Mr. Mayor. purpose of this discussion is at our last meeting, if you recall, we talked about Prairie Street and Monroe Street. Council directed staff to proceed with both of the improvements. And what we're here to make sure is we have a preliminary engineering contract with Garden and Associates. We just want to make sure before things are presented for formal votes on it that we answer all the questions on it as well. So when we look at Prairie Street and Monroe Street, the street segments that we have are listed up on the board, and the background information is right up here. But when you look at both of them, you're probably looking at somewhere close to about $1.2 million in improvements. Neither one of the projects was budgeted this next year, and basically what we're here to say is we're close enough to the next budget cycle that we are going to address the fiscal impact of the next budget cycle. We're just going to consider these as approved by council and moving on. But again, the purpose of our discussion is before formal engineering contracts are presented to you, we want to make sure everybody's on the same page that we're going to address the fiscal impacts during the next budget cycle. And it's very likely we'll issue debt for the projects as well, just so there's no surprises there. But we're going to proceed. Actually, with Garden's contract, they'll have design services done this fall, most street segments, and ready for bid. Probably, I'd say late winter, actually late December-ish, early January on the project, so they'll be scheduled for construction in 2022. But we just wanted to make sure before the formal contracts are presented for a vote that everybody's on the same page as far as addressing fiscal impacts. That's going to be worked out during the upcoming budget cycle.
I was actually a little bit surprised when you said that we were going to issue debt on it, because I had thought that if we moved that into the next fiscal year, we've already got, projects, or at least a dollar amount, and I didn't recall that debt was going to be issued for those, and that we just maybe move one of those projects and down the road a little bit, or was debt always going to be issued for those?
And see this, there's two approaches when you have an unbudgeted project. You could go in and we can delay some other project, take some other project, use the funding for it, and those decisions would be made by administration. We wouldn't do that. We'd have to go back to council and say, here's the plan, here's what we've approved, here's what's not, and list out all the options. And from our standpoint, we could go through that exercise this fall, but then what would happen is we'd turn around and start that same process again in December and January anyway on it. So what we're saying is, instead of having that process, if these projects are a priority and let's move ahead, we're just going to have that discussion in January, and that way projects that are currently scheduled, because they're all important to people, they take place. We're not delaying any project. These are just an additional, and we'll figure out the funding and the impact during the budget season. Good question on it. That's the reason why we wanted to have this session tonight.
So basically, you're saying that these projects will come up during February budget session?
We're going to consider these projects as approved. And so what happens is, when you look at it, is we already have our fiscal capacity of projects programmed. These are an addition. So what you're talking about is you have a couple choices. When you have funds on hand, you either issue debt, delay projects, work it out in a 5-year CIP. All that stuff is possible, but we're proceeding with these projects. They're approved. If there are adjustments, it could be other CIP projects, or you issue debt on the project and you manage it through the tax rate, but that's a budget process. So
I'm really not in favor of raising taxes, but I guess if we must, that's the place to do it, is on our streets.
And I want to be clear, I'm not saying property taxes are going to be raised, but from my perspective, we don't like presenting projects that we don't know the impact to finances on. And I just want to make sure everyone's on that same question, is we're going to work it out. City has roughly on an annual basis between $45 to $50 million annual budget. These projects are $1.2 million. That's not even the 5-year CIP. There's other options out there. But that whole issue of deciding on how things get funded and debt, tax rates, that's a budget process. And to stop and do that right now with everything that's going on, trying to figure out these two projects, and have to turn around and redo it during the budget process, from our standpoint, doesn't make a lot of sense from a planning standpoint.
If I read the council right, everybody thought that these two paving projects were very high priority, and I think you maybe look at the lowest priority one on the CIP, and this just replaces that, and then move that into the next year. Could be a way of doing this without issuing debt, but a project is getting delayed then. You know, there's one's getting delayed, but if a more important project gets done in its place, I don't feel badly about that.
These have been in the delay column for some time.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
They're a little dusty.
these
They're a little
have been
dusty.
circling the airport
Yeah.
for years. And again, we have a brand-new fiber optic building built on a gravel road. Friday, when it rains, the water that runs down Oskaloosa Street looks like milk. It's all running off that gravel. So you look at Oskaloosa Street on a rainy day, on the left-hand side, it's white water running down. On the right-hand side, it's clear. So I would love to spend money on something other than this, but this is a necessity. It's not even a luxury. It has to be done.
Yeah, well, I think in our other session, we indicated we wanted these done, so
Right.
that's been decided. Mike's just talking about the process now, and so.
Right.
To get the process going, get the engineers to work on it now, and then we could figure out how to pay for it in the budget session and make sure they get done next construction
Right,
season.
and that's what I
So-
was alluding to.
I don't think anybody's not saying that. I think it's
Right.
a priority to get them done.
All
So,
we gotta do is pay for it, right?
we got paid. It's always the bill at the end of the day. You get paid. All right?
That's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a couple closed sessions. Our meeting is basically over. I don't know, Bob and Charlie, you came in late. If you were here to comment on something, we've already had our public comment session. So we have a couple closed sessions we have to do now. So is anybody interested in, I don't think there will be any action taken from these closed sessions. They're mostly for discussion. So does anybody want to stay here until we get done? Otherwise, we're going to have our closed sessions there and kick all of you out. Does anybody want to talk to us after our closed sessions? Or?
Thanks for listening.
I got my 2 bits worth them, so
Okay.
that's the only reason I came, thanks.
So we'll have our closed sessions here. Support. Hopkins, Mansfield, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Names, please vote.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Banstra.
Yes.
Skibout. Sporer. DeYoung.
Yes.
Branderhorst.